Welcome to the role of psychological concepts in coaching, where the realms of psychology and coaching unite. I am Nancy Al-Hyari, your guide on this journey, brought to you by the passionate teams at Trace and Thrive Through Coaching. We're dedicated to equipping coaches like you with the cutting-edge evidence-based strategies to enhance your practice and impact. From emotional intelligence to neurodiversity, each episode is a deep dive into the tools and techniques that can transform your coaching and your clients' lives. Let's embark on this journey together, one insight at a time. Welcome to a new episode of the podcast, The Role of Psychological Concepts in Coaching. Today, we're going to touch on the fascinating world of the internal family systems, IFS. Joining me is Safia Al-Saad, a seasoned expert with over 14 years of organizational experience, blending leadership, passion, and insightful wisdom. As a human resources manager, a certified neuro-transformational coach, and a certified internal family system coach, Safia is committed to nurturing growth in both individuals and organizations. Her work is characterized by a unique approach that integrates neuroscience, positive intelligence, and coactive coaching, all anchored by the principles of internal family systems, IFS. In today's episode, Safia will discuss the transformative impact of IFS in coaching, highlighting its role in the coaching toolkit. Whether you're a coach exploring your niche or simply curious about the internal family systems, this conversation promises to enrich your understanding of the internal family system principles and how they are implemented in a coaching conversation. So let's begin. Hello, Safia, and thank you for joining me on this exciting episode.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you. I'm excited to be with you today.
Thank you. Could you start by giving us a simple breakdown of what is the internal family system model?
Yes, sure. So the internal family system is a transformative tool established by Dr. Richard Schwartz, who is a systemic family therapist and conceives every human being as a system of protective and wounded inner parts, led by a core self. The internal family system, or IFS, believes the mind is naturally multiple, which is like really tackles the multiplicity of personalities that we have, the sub-personalities that we have. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Just like members of a family, inner parts are forced from their valuable states into extreme roles within us. These parts live in the past and carry burdens. The self, with a big S, that leads is in every one of us. It cannot be damaged. It knows how to heal. That's according to the internal family system model. IFS is frequently used as an evidence-based psychotherapy, helping people heal by accessing and healing their protective and wounded inner parts. IFS creates inner and outer connectedness by helping people first access their self and from that core come to understand and heal their parts.
Thank you, Safia. Can you tell us please more about these personality roles or the multiple personalities that you mentioned?
Yes, of course. I'm going to provide a mental map of the model. So if you can view the hub of the model is the self with a big S, and this self has features. These features relate to what is called the 8 C's. It is confidence, calm, compassion, courage, creativity, clarity, curiosity, and connectedness. This is how the center or the centralized core of the whole system of internal family system. The parts are divided into 2 divisions. The one division is we call protectors, and they are divided into 2 subdivisions. The first one we call a proactive way of the system, which is we call managers, and the others are the active, and they are firefighters. The protective system, they protect the system from any other systems that can overwhelm with their traumas. And the traumatized parts, which is the 3rd division, is we call exiles, which are really wounded parts of us that were exiles since any trauma that happened that could start from a very simple trauma, like being bullied at school or maybe even yelled at simply, to a big trauma that can lead to really serious symptoms for anyone. So that's basically the whole internal family system, how it is viewed.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting. So I can imagine it. We have a core inside, and around that core, we have the protectors and the traumatization. Is that correct? And the protectors are the managers and the firefighters. Did I get that right?
Yes. Like the traumatized part, we call them exiles because they were exiled from the protective system to stay suppressed and not to overwhelm the system. Their own worry, always these exiled parts, is to really be heard and to be seen. The protectors, which are managers and firefighters, their own interest is to keep the system safe, and either with a proactive measure like the managers or a reactive way like firefighters. And I can provide examples of that.
Thank you, Safia. That was brilliant. Can you please share with us these examples?
Yes. So let's say one of my exile parts relates to any cause I'm carrying from like legacy burden, things that can relate to something that were carried over from the family. For example, a traumatized maybe mother that really channeled over this to me as a child. And I have a traumatized, right, really part that is exile. My protective part, like for example, as a manager, would be really to keep me in a good place and look really always good and never again feel the pain of this exile part. So this manager could be this controller in me that started as a very like meticulous part. By the way, all parts are really good. There are no bad parts, but they were burdened to protect the system. So this really manager that is controlling wants to keep me always in a good place by really having this control in me that controls everything, doesn't trust anyone to do anything because nobody can do it the way I do it, and I can do the best way possible. So for example, that's an example of a manager. A firefighter could really be a part of me that reacts after something that happens that really brings the pain of my exiled part, and could be like an angry part in me, could be like extremely going into alcohol, or maybe like really even committing suicide, to the extreme cases. We're talking about extreme cases. While if we have like really the self, the core, which like the main goal of this model is really to have the self lead with all of its features. The self is really the centering point. Whenever the system trusts self will lead, and they will be unburdened, and the system will be more synergistic and dealing with everyday life rather than being burdened.
Wow, beautiful. Because everybody is prone to some kind of trauma when we were kids or when you grow up or whatever, because, life happens. So yes. It's as if our protectors, they create these managers' roles as a controller or maybe something else to protect us from feeling the pain or repeating these traumas, or even, allowing us to be in that position again, and how these managers are created to protect us. That's a wonderful example to show a case IFS, internal family system, works. And can you please tell us how the IFS stand out from other approaches, and either in therapy or coaching?
Yes. Thank you for that question. So the IFS model, what's different about it? It views a person as containing an ecology of relatively discrete minds, each of which has valuable qualities and each of which is designed and wants to play a valuable role within. These parts are forced out of their valuable roles, however, by life experiences that can recognize the system in an unhealthy way. The IFS model represents a new synthesis of two already existing paradigms, the system thinking and the multiplicity of mind. So that really differentiates us from other modalities. And what was interesting is that the whole model came into really existence because Dr. Schwartz, who's steeped into system thinking, as a family doctor, he was tracking sequence of internal from his client. He started to hear them like really using the language of parts, like part of me feels like this, part of me feels like that. And this is where he started to get really curious and to learn more and observe how really these clients are using this language of multiplicity and of the mind. And all of a sudden, when he asked about one of the times, is this part of you? One of the clients said, no, that's not part of me, that's really me. And he started to feel this energy of the 8 C's that I shared earlier, this core self, that self with a big S, that leading the system from a very clear and connected and curious, and all of the IACs like a demonstration in the language of their clients, if that makes sense.
No, definitely does. And how do you incorporate all of these principles of IFS into day-to-day coaching?
So what was really eye-opening for me and really transformative to me as a coach? So I come from a very different background. I was basically a active coach, and then neuroscience, positive intelligence, a lot of tools and modalities. But what I loved about IFS is that it's a powerful tool that integrated the coaching modalities that I have and got me to really view human beings from the systems perspective that considers seriously the multiplicity of the mind, not only to be identified by one feeling or one dimension. No, the multiplicity of mind really is taken seriously here. And accordingly, really diving into a deep conversation and dialogue with the client's inner world. So instead of having a passive conversation as I used to do before I learned the IFS, my conversation is now directed towards the parts and their feelings, roles, burdens that need attention in the coaching space. It aims eventually at empowering the client's self with a big S. Of course, we're talking about the 8 C's here with all of their features to lead this internal conversation, to heal the parts and empower the client's system.
I love that how it acknowledges that human beings are complex. And can we say that the first steps in IFS would be acknowledging the different roles that we have in our lives?
So definitely what we call, there is an exercise that is very important for you whenever you want to start the coaching space and even the therapy space. And there is a very important border that I want to bring to mind here between the two, if you allow me, Nancy, is that the therapy is really deeper and taking this model, while coaching, there is a border, because the cases I deal with as a coach definitely won't be as deep as all of the cases that a therapist can take. As a coach, I will have the borderline whenever I feel that this person needs to be I will advise to go and see a therapist. Both therapy or coaching, we start by an exercise that's called the mapping, which we collect information about the parts and listen to what they share, give them attention. And this is done to 6 important F's, as it's called in IFS, which is find, focus, flesh out, feel, befriend, and fears. It doesn't have to be sequential. It can be one before the other, but some of them are really important to start with, like the find and the focus, for example, how to really see the parts.
Wonderful. So there is going to be like an assessment before we go into the IFS coaching. And if we're going to move forward and think of what obstacle do you commonly face when you're using the internal family system in coaching, and how do you deal with them?
Okay, so let's maybe have your question answered from a different angle. It's not an obstacle if I don't really have myself as a coach here prepared. Before we sit in any session, in any coaching session, we need to be ready. What I mean by ready here in the IFS language is that I really want to connect with my self energy, like the big S. I want to sit with the client as somebody who's bringing the self to the space, which is really compassionate and clear and really connected in a way that I'm holding the space for the client from a self energy rather than from any of my parts really driving the wheel. Otherwise, it's going to be a really chaotic way of dealing of the session. And that really speaks to how we as coaches were coached and maybe trained to hold the space with self-management and have the agenda and hold the agenda of the client. But here, what I love about IFS is that it really gives the more concentration and the focus of the self-energy, which is really beautiful and doesn't interfere with whatever the client is bringing. So if I am in the self-energy, I'm clear and holding the space and aware of my inner world as a coach. Yet, if I'm not, here's where the challenge comes. Because I will be really triggering the client's parts or maybe forcing them to have higher walls, like the protective parts, for example. Their walls will be higher even. I won't have an access to the system. So it is important to avoid these challenges, to be in the self and to charge myself as a coach to hold the space. Another challenge I would bring here as a coach here is that sometimes I will really be entering into a place of maybe I will have one of these traumatized parts, the exiles. They need maybe bigger attention than mine and this client to advise to turn into therapy. Yet the way that we were trained in IFS to deal with such level when we are coaching is that how to really wrap up the session in a way that won't harm the system and will take care of this exile at its place so that the session will be closed in a very safe way for the client. And then the decision can be made. The client has all the freedom to choose to go to a therapist or not, but to close the session safely so that the client won't be overwhelmed and we won't really have the client go into a really down the drain with all of the traumas that the client has.
That was great, Safia. Thank you. Do you think, though, that using techniques from the internal family system model could help us maintain our role as coaches, focusing on being present, supportive, rather than slipping into roles like the healer or the fixer? What do you think?
Absolutely, Nancy. And IFS gives a very deep look about the coach or therapist's own world and the attention, in addition to the world of the coachee as well. So here, definitely we're not playing the role of the fixer. It is really viewing everyone as naturally creative and resourceful and whole. And the aim and the goal, as I mentioned at the beginning, is to have the self conversation between the client's inner world. So my intention as a coach here is to really eventually help the client unburden his or her parts and have the self lead the system, which is really encouraging the inner conversation of the clients with themselves. And this is where they are self-empowered, and they are nobody is broken. They are really, everyone is beautiful and inner, just they need to unburden the system. And that's where they take care of themselves, and they're going to be empowered to really take the lead. The self will lead, so that this person will be using this beautiful inner family of him or hers in a way that will develop his career, his role, his life in any way that is really desired.
Thank you, Safia. That's really awesome. So it's like connecting the core self to all the outside world and make that harmony, and not let maybe our exiles to control us and control what our managers do, I guess.
It's not about really these parts. It's about viewing them deeply in their core as really gifts and beautiful, serving the system, but they were burdened. Exactly, I always comes to mind when I see children in this world, unfortunate to be beggars, or they're not really with their families, and they were raised up in outside world, were abused or anything. They're at their core, they're beautiful, innocent children, and they were abused in a way or another. And these parts, we help them to unburden so that they can return to their beautiful core self. So these parts, there are no bad parts. They're all really amazingly serving the system, but the way they were lived throughout the life of the client or each one of us, they had some really challenges in the life that burdened them. And that's why we help them to unburden, so that there would be a symphony between the self and the other parts, and playing really a beautiful symphony to serve the client. It's a journey, because we need them to be present, and we need them to really communicate, and we need to give them attention, because this is what they deserve. And then they've been really, so whenever we have feeling, they've been really suppressed in a way or another, or maybe the unawareness, Nancy. So because if we have, for example, an angry part in us, that's, we don't know that it's a part. We know that we're angry at some of the situations really kind of triggers us and brings anger in us. So this anger, we view it as a feeling, while internal family system views it more seriously, as I said, the multiplicity of the mind, that this is an angry part. So if you do this internal dialogue with this part and ask, okay, what are you angry about? Where are you located? All of these modalities and tools that we use sometimes to externalize, to really, if you want, I can tell you more about the tools that are used, so that the conversation will be more fruitful, so that we can hear from them and give them the attention. And this is what they all want. They want the attention, really kids that you're raising up, really viewing yourself internally as really having this family. And you need to bring harmony to this system of family that you have.
I love it. So as if looking at all these roles and manager, that they are our family. Okay, I love that. And because you've already mentioned tools, so let's talk about that a little bit. Do you recommend any tools for the coaches to use?
So I go back with what I mentioned at the beginning, and then I continue. So I said the mapping exercise, so that we can use the 6 Fs, as I mentioned earlier. And then from there, we can really learn about the protective system and befriend it, and really give it the security that it needs, so that it knows it's serving the system and we appreciate it. And from there, we can use different things like the dialogue we're using, the internal dialogue, assessing that. There's an IFS language as well. When we talk the parts, we localize the parts in the body. So embodiment is there as well. There's a sense of whenever there is a part that's speaking, we ask the client, where do you feel it in your body? We locate that part, the part, where is it in the body, and what kind of energy does it bring? Also, we can use diagrams and as coaches to have this mapping externalized, and how we see the parts. Journaling as well is one of the imaging techniques. And we have really something that's very relevant for us as coaches, which is we call in the internal family language, as one of the tools is to call direct access, where the therapist or the coach is directly talking to the part, rather than having the self of the client in the middle. And this is where the self is not yet very, let's say, exposed or having the leading role in the client's system. And this is where I help as a coach to bring my self energy to have this conversation directly to the part. So it's self to part energy rather than part to part. And there is also other tools, like we call externalizing tools, could be drawing. We also use going like back to unburden the parts, going back in the past and then bringing them in the present. Usually these parts, they don't know the actual age of the client. They think that things stopped at the trauma time they had. For example, some of them, they think they're still 6 years old or 10 years old, and we bring them to the present. We call it retrieval. And then we have future imaging as well. Other things also as kind of imagination, using the light as well. And the unburdening is beautifully also done with really using the natural environment resources, like maybe throwing in the sea or by the wind, maybe burying in the sand, or even burning. Like these are kind of the things that you can like let go of the burdens. And with kids, as I said, we use art, like play, like role therapy, sand trays. So it's like different tools and techniques that are really interesting, and they bring so many flavors in the session.
Awesome. So the internal family system model provides coaches with a lot of effective tools that they can use to assist their clients. With that, could you please share a memorable story where the IFS model significantly helped a client or even yourself or someone you know?
Yes, of course. Like what comes to mind is one time there was really amazingly the client connected with really the legacy burden that she carried from the parents, and bringing that to a space and connecting even one of the parents like the way. And this she could really connect with this parent's thoughts, images, and what was there. I invited her to go to the past, to the scene that she was like, this part was frozen, and she got to really heal the conversation and settle and hear even from the father's like perspective what was there and what was needed, and how she can really claim her power. And even the shouting that she couldn't do at that time, she felt that suppression, and because of the session and the space of the session, she could really do the shouting that she wanted to do, and that made like a big relief for her. And it to so many like deep healing places to be in good terms and really close to her relationship with her father from a place of like really love and compassion, rather than really angry or let's say resisting or even hate perspective. So kind of that's where the unburdening happened. And it was really a big moving stage, let's say, in her life when she had these sessions. Of course, these comes through different sessions, not only one session. And it took her to a lot of other places that she was curious about to discover more in her life because of this letting go of this legacy burden that she carried before.
That's a powerful story. It shows how the IFS helped this person to, as you said, to unburden and let go. A lot of us sometimes lose a parent or even someone close to us, but we still have a lot to say. Would we say that's a manager who was letting her be in that space?
It's both. The manager was protecting her and bringing this really cold face that she's okay, everything is fine, maybe feelings are not communicated even. And after this manager, really, I listened to that manager's burdens and unburdens and took permission to really see what's beyond. There was this exiled place part that needed the attention of hers, that needed to go back in time, where the scene of like whatever happens there, without disclosing any really here like more details, but taking this little girl of hers to the scene and having that conversation all over again from a place of unburdened place, and this exile that really wanted to communicate and express, was really powerful and brought a lot of like empowerment to the system and the self-leading as well.
Interesting. And while you work with coaches, what signs do you look for to assess if it's it's effective, or if it's not, or if there's another route that you need to go to?
So it's never one session. It takes a lot of layers and conversations, and sometimes even the conversation with the part, because usually the protective part is protecting the system since a long time, and it needs several sessions to trust this conversation. So it takes several sessions for that to really open up, and really every time there is a layer, and every time there's an agreement that is made between the self of the client with the self, with the part of that client, so that they can start disharmony and trust in the system. And it takes like really time for the system to open up and trust.
Can you share with us like one exercise that our listeners can today maybe connect with their managers?
Okay, I'll say two things here, two techniques or two exercises. The first one is really every one of us can have this internal mapping by really just observing what voices do we have in our heads. Like simply, but just really differentiating the different voices we have and really looking and sensing these voices as actual parts from that perspective of the IFS and really sense the tone and the differences. So maybe I'll have a very calm voice, maybe the caring in me, maybe the other voice is really angry, the grumpy, like what is it? And really be curious and hold the space for this part with more of like questioning. Just ask questions internally so that you can really get to know who are these parts that I have in my internal family system. That's one thing. And the other exercise that is really one of my favorites is to know more about yourself, and which is the leading core place here, is that you can bring a paper and fold it into 8 pieces and just draw what does it mean for you, each of the C's that I mentioned here. So for example, what does courage mean for you? Just draw it, like have a set of coloring pens and really start to draw what does connectedness mean to me. Maybe for me, for example, it's kind of hearts connected to each other. I drew that. Clarity, what does clarity mean? For me, it would be like, for example, the sunshine on a seashore that is very calm. What would courage look like? And so on and so forth. So drawing these 8 C's would externalize the features of the self so that we can bring more of these and ask ourselves, out of 10, how do I have really each of these C's? Like we can really rate and measure. For example, if I have courage, I have it 5 out of 10. So what would make it a 10, for example? I would really measure where am I courageous to have more of that conversation. Calm, maybe I have calmness like 2 out of 10. So what do I need to be more calm? What brings this calm energy to me? How can I connect? Like, for example, for me, prayer brings really a lot of calmness and it increases that as well. So I think of the 8 C's and really externalize them in terms of drawing and colors. And you don't have to be a Picasso to have really good drawing. It's any kind of drawing, simply just to externalize with your own flavor and with your own colors. Using the hand is really powerful so that you would know what would the self energy look like and how to really measure it and how to boost it as well, which it will help in the internal dialogue you're having with your parts.
Thank you for sharing these exercises. Both of them are really powerful exercises, and I hope, everybody who's listening can try them and tell us how that feels like. Mm-hmm. And as we draw close to the end of our conversation, Safia, is there anything, any advice or any resources would you recommend for our coaches or want to be coaches? Where can they read more or learn more about the internal family systems?
Yes, absolutely. So I will have two dimensions of my answer, Nancy, if you allow me. The first one is definitely I want to confirm that there are no bad parts. And as a coach, I was trained in a way or another that we have sabotaging voices that we need to get rid of or maybe mute or minimize. While here in the internal family system, the no bad parts point of view gives really empowerment to our system and really acknowledges each power that we have and each gift that we have, and we're enough. And that's what the internal family system brings. We're gifted and we just want to really unburden what we have inside so that we can really make use of the gifts that we have. That's one dimension. The other thing is that definitely I'm referencing here the website of the IFS, which is ifs-institute.com. It has all the resources and definitely a lot of my shares today, I'm referencing their website. And also, as I was trained in level 1, which is the level 1 is the level that is required for coaches. For therapists, they go even more to level 2 and level 3. But level 1, I was trained on, and it changed me personally and changed my life. Beautifully, it's going to be offered here in Jordan. And you can find the information under trainings in the IFS website that I shared right now. So if you're interested, you can visit IFRA Center and you can learn about more the system and read about a lot of resources, books, researches, and the website and the trainings as well. If you're interested to have a training here or even in other areas, there are a lot of trainings are mentioned there, so you can subscribe in.
Thank you very much, Safia. This has been very interesting and it grows your curiosity to learn more about it, definitely. Thank you, Safia. This has been very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the role of psychological concepts in coaching. Stay curious, stay inspired, and join us next time as we continue to explore the transformative power of psychology in coaching. Until then, keep thriving and making a difference. I am Nancy Al-Hayari on behalf of Race and Thrive Through Coaching, wishing you all the best on your coaching journey.